Hello, everyone. It's Chad, and today I want to talk about handling negative emotions and negative situations. I think that one of the most toxic things you can do is to hang on something negative for a long period of time. I think that it has a long term effect. It may make you less trusting of people. It may make a situation that's similar feel like it's the worst case scenario. I think one of the ways that we can best handle these situations is accepting that we feel a certain way about it immediately, understanding and connecting with how we feel on the inside, and being able to express that effectively. I think for introverted feeling users, it's a little more difficult because we don't feel like we can express ourselves unless the environment is pretty logically consistent. So it makes it to where we feel like maybe what we're saying is not ideal. It's like we're trying to say something, but we can't say it effectively. Um, Especially my personality type. We struggle greatly with this manner, but I do believe that we have to acknowledge that we feel something as long as we acknowledge it to ourselves that we feel a certain way about things. I recently had a situation where I unfortunately had a falling out with a friend, and well, a couple friends actually, and being able to look back and acknowledge how I felt and what mistakes I made. I think one of the most important things you can do is not expect change from the other person, but look at change within yourself because that's the only thing you can control. Don't try to convince somebody or point out someone's faults. Just look at your own, and hopefully it'll bring someone to realize that they made a few mistakes themselves. I think by doing that, it takes a position of peace. Peace is important. Conflict is great for growth. The conflict is what already started, but to resolve the conflict, it requires a position of peace. Take the high road and look at what you can do to develop yourself in every situation. How can I become better from the situation? How can I prevent future occurrences from the situation? And how can I be a better person overall? How can I treat people better from this day forward instead of making the same mistakes that I've made in the past? And I just wish that at some point we could universally do this with each other so that we'd be able to accept each other's differences at times and mistakes that we make instead of, you know, being so hard on each other at times. This is a time in our society where we're going to need each other. Things are changing at a very rapid pace, and things are almost getting to the point where there's so much uncertainty. And at the end of the day, who do you have? Who's important? And what are you doing today to cherish those relationships and the relationships that really are healthy for you, not the toxic ones, but the healthy ones, and even the toxic ones. How do you handle those? How are you able to move past those? How are you able to disassociate from those in your life? How are you able to set those behind you? I think these are proper perspectives we need in order to enhance who we are and get in touch with our inner self and determine what's best for future generations. And handling these problems really sets an example, I think. It's the way and manner which we handle them will allow us to develop our future in a healthy manner versus saying, oh, I don't trust 30 girls because they all did this, or I don't trust 50 people because they all did this, or I don't trust a certain demographic because they all behave this way. And naturally it's common to stereotype gender, race, position, anything. Even MBTI types. I get a lot of feedback about how ENTJs are total dicks, and I wish it wasn't that way. And we've definitely not done well in being able to show why we are the way we are, but we have done a very poor job in that. And I think if we connect on some level and are able to set aside our differences and really look at things in a very universal way and understand that some people are feeling based and sometimes emotion and feeling are emotion and feeling are one segment and logic is another, so you can't possibly try to solve emotion with logic. It just doesn't work. It's like even if the person's reacting emotionally in any situation, you know how frustrated it makes somebody who's getting a little emotional if you try to logically solve their issue. It's like they're not being rational. You know they're not being rational, but you telling them they're not being rational is one of the worst things you could do. One of the most important things is understanding their feeling and not try to take a position of defensiveness and humble yourself. If they choose to forgive you, that's one thing. If they don't, then that's another. I mean, you can't control the other person. You have to set aside what you expect them to do and only focus on yourself. What can you do to grow? And it's hard. It's not easy. And a lot of times if the relationship is important to you, you can appeal as much as you can, but you can't change someone's mind. Ultimately, the person's going to change their mind based on their own decision, their own process, and you have to give them what they expect from that. So if a person wants to be alone to process, you have to leave them alone. If a person wants to be together to process, then you have to work with them on that. Just try to set aside your own values, and not values, but try to set aside your own ways of processing information and really empathize with the way they are. I think that's a big start in being able to advance our ability to interconnect with each other, because we're struggling as a society to be able to do this effectively. Sorry for the movement there. So I think one of the most important things is just being able to connect with people and to set aside your own desires, to really reach out to them and help understand and be a friend. I think that's one of the most important things, and it's sad that we have to be absent of such things because we make mistakes, but it happens, and mistakes happen, and sometimes they're unforgivable. But all you can do is really look back, and you can learn from every situation that happens to you. And if you store it as an experience in your mind that all these things are only going to make you better, they're only going to make you stronger, and that's what I tell myself every time I go through another experience that seems seemingly so bad. And at the time it hurts, and trying to ignore that hurt can be a problem. You don't want to ignore the pain. If you try to ignore the pain, it's only going to bottle itself up. I'm not saying just go cry it out. I'm saying acknowledge that it exists. Pain is part of the process. It's like when you work out, you feel the burn. You have to go through that part. That part allows you to identify with that feeling, and it's painful at times. And just don't make it the conversation about you. If you're having a problem with someone else, don't make it about you. Don't go back and say, you're making me feel bad. You're making me feel guilty, because again, you're taking the emphasis off of them. If they're hurt and they're complaining at you and they're yelling at you and whatever else they're doing at you, they're screaming at you, and you try to bring your emotions to the forefront and say, hey, you're making me feel bad, you're making it about you again. It's important that you say you can empathize with the way they feel. And you don't want to be condescending. And sometimes you can be condescending by being too passive. Sometimes it's like you want to make sure that you're not being too passive. But you do want to make sure that you are truly trying to understand what they say. And I mean with the utmost maturity. Really, truly try to understand what they're saying to you, and try to understand their shoes. And I mean, from the position of their shoes, look at what they're feeling, and just don't be defensive about it. Even if you made tons of mistakes, don't try to cover it up. Don't say that they're wrong, and don't say that's not what, don't say that. Don't say they're wrong, because they feel like they're right. And trying to say they're wrong can create more conflict, which generally doesn't result in very good solutions. Instead, look back and realize that you do have an answer, and the answer is just sitting and being quiet and just letting a person vent. It's important that we do that. So, I know I rambled on. I don't even know if I hit a point. I've just been kind of in intuitive space lately, so I hope this message really hits home for some people. I hope that it does provide some value for the viewers watching this. So anyway, I will hopefully talk to you all soon. Thanks so much.